Welcome to this deep dive brought to you by Safety One Source. Today we're really zeroing in on some critical parts of OSHA's fall protection standards.
Yeah, specifically focusing on those interpretations that can sometimes trip people up.
Exactly. We want to give you, the safety professionals, the risk managers, anyone really wanting to boost workplace safety, some practical takeaways.
And these come straight from OSHA interpretation letters, so it's, their official stance on specific questions people had, real-world stuff.
Perfect. Think of it as getting some clarity on how these rules actually play out on the job site. Our mission is basically to cut through the jargon and find the useful bits.
Couldn't have said it better.
Okay, so let's jump right in with fixed ladders. Section 1910.28b IB, that's the big one for ladders over 24 feet. What's the key thing for new versus existing ones?
Right. So OSHA's basically set up two different tracks here. If you put in a new fixed ladder, say on or after November 19, 2018.
Okay, that date's important.
Very. And if it goes higher than 24 feet above the lower level, you absolutely positively need a personal fall arrest system or a ladder safety system. That's it.
No more cages or wells for those new ones then?
Nope. Cages and wells are out for new installations after that date.
But what about all the ladders that were already there before November 2018? Lots of facilities have those.
Good question. For those existing ladders, yes, cages or wells are still acceptable for now. But, and this is key for planning.
There's always a but.
Yeah. If you replace any part of that older system, like a major section, the cage itself, you have to bring it up to the new standard, meaning integrate a personal fall arrest or ladder safety system.
So piece-by-piece upgrades are required if you repair?
Essentially, yes. And there's a final drop-dead date, too. By November 18th, 2036, every fixed ladder over 24 feet, new or old, has to have a personal fall arrest or ladder safety system.
2036. Okay, sounds like a ways off, but I guess for budgeting and planning.
Exactly. You need that foresight. You can't just rely on cages indefinitely. Safety managers really need to get that on their long-range plans.
Makes sense. Now, measuring that 24 feet, is it just the length of the ladder itself?
No. And that's where people sometimes get it wrong. It's not about, say, individual 10-foot sections separated by platforms.
Right.
It's the total potential fall distance.
Yeah.
From where you could fall down to the ground or the next lower level.
So like that grain silo example, even with offset ladders and platforms, if a fall past a platform could be more than 24 feet to the ground.
Then fall protection is required, yeah.
Yeah.
The AGI NFS inquiry touched on this. If the system prevented a fall over the platform and any fall to a platform was under 24 feet, maybe not. But the general rule...
Like the quality execution letter.
Exactly. If a ladder starts way up high, say 100 feet up, even if you're only climbing a short bit above a landing, the total potential fall dictates the need for protection if it's over 24 feet. That's that aggregate exposure.
Okay, that clarifies things. So, cages are allowed for existing ladders for now, but are they really as good as, say, a personal fall arrest system, even if you don't have to upgrade yet?
That's a really smart question. Look, cages might feel safe, but they don't stop a fall like a PFAS does.
You could still hit stuff inside the cage?
Yeah, you could strike rungs, the cage itself, get injured. A properly used personal fall arrest system is designed to, arrest the fall quickly, minimize those impact forces. So even if cages are technically allowed for a bit longer, knowing their limits is, pretty important for your overall safety strategy.
Are there any times these fixed ladder rules don't apply? Any exceptions?
Yes. One specific one is for emergency ladders on grain silos.
Okay.
If a ladder is only for emergency escape, like for egress, and it's clearly marked top and bottom access points, then OSHA's current stance is that safety devices aren't required.
But it has to be strictly emergency use and clearly labeled.
Absolutely. Can't be used for routine access. Needs unambiguous marking.
And I remember something about the outdoor advertising folks having different rules for a while. Billboards and such.
Yeah, that was sort of a transitional thing before the November 2018 deadline fully kicked in.
What was allowed then?
For their existing ladders, they could use body harnesses with rest lanyards, keep hands-free climbing, stuff like that, with proper fall protection at the actual work spot.
Mm-hmm.
And the OALA letter clarified measuring height on billboards too, again, fall potential from the ground up.
But that's mostly history now.
Pretty much. Those earlier options are largely superseded by the current rules that apply to everyone since late 2018. Good to know the history, but focus on the current regs.
Got it. Okay, let's shift gears. Scaffolds and their anchorages, another area where load requirements are absolutely critical for safety managers.
Definitely. And what's interesting here is how OSHA treats the scaffold load versus the load on whatever's holding the scaffold up.
How so?
Well, the scaffold itself, the platform workers are on, that needs to support at least 4 times the maximum intended load. Big safety factor there.
4 times. Okay.
But the structure the scaffold is tied to, or maybe resting on like that generator frame example in one interpretation.
Right, I remember that.
That structure doesn't need the same 4 times factor. OSHA says it just needs to be sound, rigid, and capable of carrying the maximum intended load without settling or moving.
So the generator frame just had to hold the generator plus the intended scaffold load, including its own safety margin, but not 4 times the combined weight.
Precisely. It's a subtle but important difference when you're assessing if a support structure is adequate. Affects how you plan the setup.
That is a key point. Okay, what about anchorages for things like window washing equipment? And the safety lines, the lifelines workers attached to?
Yeah, the focus there is all about reliability. Those anchorages have to be permanent installations, sound, rigid, and able to support whatever maximum load they're rated for.
And can cruise?
And crucially, a point emphasized way back in a 1986 interpretation, the worker's lifeline must have its own separate anchorage point, completely independent from the equipment anchor.
Cannot tie off to the same point, holding the window washing rig.
Absolutely not. Your fall arrest needs its own dedicated solid anchor.
Are there specific strength numbers we should know?
Well, there's been some evolution. ANSI A10.14 recommended 8,400 pounds dead weight load. OSHA's looked at requiring lifeline anchors to handle the actual impact force of a fall.
Which makes sense.
Right. And generally, lanyards and lifelines themselves need a minimum braking strength of 5,000 pounds. That 86 letter also suggested a minimum design dead weight load of 5,000 pounds for roof anchors makes logical sense.
So 5,000 pounds is kind of a benchmark number.
It often comes up, yeah. And critically important, you need signs. 1910.145C requires safety signs clearly stating the load capacity of these anchorages. Everyone needs to know the limits.
Prevents overloading, misuse, basic stuff, but essential. Okay, let's talk low slope roofs. Always a challenge.
Oh, absolutely. It's covered in 1910.28B13. OSHA basically sets up zones based on how far you are from the edge.
What are the zones?
3 main ones. Working less than 6 feet from the edge, working between 6 and 15 feet, and working 15 feet or more from the edge.
And the rules change depending on the zone.
They do. Inside that 6-foot zone, you need robust protection. Guardrails, safety nets, travel restraint, or personal fall arrest systems. Pretty strict.
Okay. And between 6 and 15 feet?
Same options are good. They're guardrails, nets, PFAS, travel restraint. But you also get the option of using a designated area.
Ah, the designated area. There's a catch, though, isn't there?
There is. You can only use a designated area in that 6 to 15-foot zone if the work is both infrequent and temporary.
And that's where the interpretation questions come in. What is infrequent and temporary? Seems subjective.
It does, but OSHA's clarified it. Temporary means the task itself is brief. Like it takes less time to do the task than it would to set up guardrails or anchors.
Okay, short duration.
Right. Infrequent means that it doesn't happen often. Think like annual maintenance or responding to a breakdown, not something you do daily or routinely.
So even if checking an HVAC unit only takes 5 minutes?
If you're doing it every day on multiple roofs, like in that MCAA letter example with the service tech doing daily rounds.
That's not infrequent.
Exactly. Even though each task is temporary, the frequency means it doesn't qualify for that designated area exception between 6 and 15 feet or the exception for work beyond 15 feet.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. What about just getting to the work area? Say I climb a portable ladder onto a low-slope roof and walk 25 feet inland to where I need to work. Do I need fall protection just for walking?
That came up in the Piedmont Service Group inquiry. OSHA stated there isn't actually a specific rule demanding fall protection just for that initial access walk across the roof away from the edge.
Interesting.
But the moment you start working 15 feet or more from the edge, that infrequent and temporary rule kicks in. If the work isn't infrequent and temporary, you need protection even out there.
And if the work, or even the path, takes you inside that 6-foot zone,
then fall protection is absolutely required, no question. Guardrail, net, PFAS, travel restraint. So the walk itself might be okay, but the work location and nature dictates the need.
Okay, that covers the main scenarios. Let's just briefly touch on the general standard, 1910.28A. What's the big picture there?
It's really the foundation. It establishes the employer's basic duty to provide fall protection and falling object protection wherever it's needed.
The overarching requirement.
Exactly. It says all the required protection has to meet the specific criteria laid out later in the standard. It's the umbrella rule.
Does it list any general situations where fall protection isn't required by this main section?
It does list some exceptions, yeah. Things like work on portable ladders, certain pre-work inspections if there's no protection installed yet, entertainment stages, rail platforms, powered platforms, aerial lifts.
Things often covered by other specific rules.
Right. Or where the risk profile is considered different. Also specific telecom and electric power generation work, which have their own detailed standards.
And we should always remember that general trigger height.
Yes, the 4-foot rule from 1910.28.
Yes.
1. For most unprotected sides and edges, if the potential fall is 4 feet or more to a lower level, fall protection is required. That's a fundamental baseline.
This has been really useful diving into these specific interpretations. It really highlights how you need to understand the nuances, doesn't it? Especially for safety pros and risk managers.
Absolutely. Reading the standard is one thing, but seeing how OSHA applies it in these real-world letters gives you that practical edge for compliance and, more importantly, for actually keeping people safe.
Couldn't agree more. And we definitely encourage everyone listening to, check out the full standards and these letters on OSHA's website.
Yeah, OSHA.gov. It's the definitive source. Always good to stay updated directly from them.
So that leaves us with a final thought for you, our listeners. Thinking about everything we've discussed, the new versus existing ladder rules, the 2036 deadline, scaffold anchor loads, those tricky infrequent and temporary definitions on roofs. How can you take these specific OSHA interpretations and use them to really sharpen your own organization's fall protection plans, your training programs? How can you make them even better?
Great question to ponder.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive brought to you by Safety One Source.